Hi friends, today we are painting this gouache lily and I will show you exactly what to do. So stick around, we're gonna have so much fun. So today I'm using this lovely book I got from the library, Gouache in 4 Easy Steps. And I wanted to use this as a reference. I'm not completely copying it, although I am copying the actual sketch of it. Just gonna sketch it out and then show you guys how I wanted to paint it out. So it's gonna be pink like that with some details. Here's my sample I'll be sketching. So I have my sketch here. If you wanna pause the video at this point and copy it, you're more than welcome to do that. But we're just gonna get into painting now. So I've got some extra paint here and I'm just using the palette that I used for a previous painting with gouache this last month, and I'm just mixing a nice pink with the red and with the white, and I'm not even worrying about having the same value of pink on each petal. In fact, I actually welcome it being different just to give a little variation. And of course, when we start putting in the details of the lily, we won't see so much of that variation anyway. So if that's something that you like to do, matching the colors exactly, you could mix up a bunch of that light pink, a whole bunch of it, and just use that, or kind of mix it how I am doing, just on the go. And see, the one I've just put down is really light. That's okay. Variation is beautiful, I think. I think that anyway. So we've got 6 petals on this lily. As some of you know, I am normally doing watercolor, but I'm pushing myself this year to learn more about gouache. And so for my Patreons, I am doing a monthly video on gouache for those that want to try it. And this will be available for my Patreons for an amount of time, and then I will release it to the public. So if you're watching it on YouTube and it's a public video, well, I've just released it, and now hopefully this can be something that inspires you if you're learning to paint with gouache. Gouache is wonderful. It's so versatile. And unlike watercolor, you can do all the layers, light to dark, dark to light. And here I'm just kind of filling in all the things. It is that basic wash or layer of color. And so we're not worried too much about things and the details. We just want to get that blanket of color on there. So we have our shapes all mapped out. We have where the edges are. And if we're going to paint anything in the negative space, that's the space around the petals and leaves, we can do that at this time. I'm not going to do that, but you can later if you'd like. So mixing up my green, I have a really nice dark earthy green color here, and I'm going to use that for my lovely stem. I'm using gouache brushes, by the way. These are by Sarah Burns, and she does amazing things with gouache. If you want to check out her YouTube channel, I will link her information below in the description, and as well as her brushes. I don't know if they're back in stock. I actually bought them on the day that they were available. Yeah, these are not gifted or sponsored at all. I just really love them. And I didn't open the box for a few months. I actually accidentally sent them to my previous address in another state. And that person who lives there now had to send them over to me. So then they sat around for a while and I finally popped them out of the box. And I'm really impressed with them. Really good quality, especially with the round brushes. The points on them are fantastic. So anyway, link in the description below if you'd like to check them out or check out her channel. I am so inspired by her watercolor. Well, watercolor, she does watercolor as well as gouache, and she does a lot of painting outside, plein air painting, and she has been an inspiration to me to want to learn more and practice more painting outside. So I'm just putting in these leaves. I've got that lighter green color, so I've got just a lot of yellow in that green. You can take your dark green that you've mixed up, add in some yellow, lighten that up. And of course, we're going to want to do some different values of green, and we can do that later on. As you can see right now, I'm holding the brush really lightly, and it's giving me a little bit less control, but more of a loose hold, so a loose style that's coming through. And also, I didn't want to put the heel of my hand or my palm in the paint that's wet on the flower. So that means hovering is really my only option. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that same brush and we're gonna start to add in some lovely details. So I am starting to get a little bit more saturated pink, added in a little bit more red there as I was mixing it up, and clearly not dark enough, so adding more red here. We're just going to start to make some kind of scratchy marks, starting to add in some details. We're going to darken up the center of our lily too because we want to show a bit of a shadowed side, or yeah, why am I saying a bit? A lot of shadowed side. And I'm darkening up the tips of this as well. So we're going to do several layers and just see what looks good, what works for us. Of course, at towards the end of that, we're going to add in this stamen, the middle parts of the flower, and that's going to make it look realistic or more realistic and more recognizable. So some darker red, I'm adding some brown in to the red that's already in my palette. And we're just going to try using that for the center of the flower and then see how we like it. Just stippling in, adding in some little dots around that center part. Now here's another gouache tip for you. If you didn't know this already, you can buy something called watercolor blending medium. Gouache tends to dry out really fast, but I found that if I put 6 or 7 drops of this blending medium, it's a clear liquid, and mix that into the wells. You can see how big my wells are right here. It helps to keep that paint from drying out, and unlike water, which evaporates pretty quickly, this evaporates a little bit less quickly. It will eventually evaporate too, and you'll just have your paint. But I have noticed, especially when I have my paint here all on the mixing tray, and it's really thin and it doesn't have as much liquid, I do use some water on my palette to be able to mix my paints, but the more you put in there, of course, the more transparent it becomes, kind of like watercolor. And of course, as you guys can see, I'm just outlining my petals right now, and then I'll do a fair amount of blending as I see fit here, depending on what look I'm going for here. And I will just dip my brush in water and just kind of dab it on the paper towel. And now we're going to blend out those lines so they're not so stark. I kind of like it as I'm looking at it now, but I do want to be a little bit more subtle. So kind of do what you want. So anyway, the paint is really thin here, these layers on the palette, and it's just going to keep it from drying out fast. Without it, my paint would dry up so fast I could not keep my palette open for 20 minutes or however long it's been open here. So anyway, watercolor blending medium has been a lifesaver or a game changer for me. So let me know in the comments below, have you used blending medium either for this or for something else? Let me know what you think about it. I'm really curious. And it's not something that I made up. I saw a YouTuber and a video that she was producing. I can't remember now the name of the person, but it was such a great tip. I tried it and I'm really pleased with it. Another tip here is I have my mixing tray, just like with my watercolor palette. When I want to use my gouache again, I just take a spray bottle and I spray it down. It reactivates the paint. And of course it does get thinner, more like watercolor as you keep adding water, but just keep adding more paint and you'll get that nice thick gouache texture once again. So a little bit more pink on my brush. You can see it's a pretty nice saturated pink so far. And I'm going to use this paint to go over the center parts and the tips of the petals as well. I want to darken them up a little bit. Even some of that brownish red could be used for some detail and some texture as well. So just kind of go over your lily. That left petal is a little bit wet still from previous paint, so the details are not showing up, but that's okay. Can kind of add to the texture and the personality of that petal. That's fine. All right, so just darkening up a little bit there. And, you know, again, with gouache, it's great. You're doing layers. You can go back and forth. If you make something lighter, you can always go darker if you don't like how it turned out. So I'm adding some more yellow to my dark green here, just for some brightness. And let's just see how that adds up. And just adding a little bit to the centers of the flowers. And then I think I'm going to add a little bit more dark. So I'm adding in some of that lovely turquoise color. And I want to add in some dark moments here. We just want to give some nice dimension to our leaves and make them really pop off the page. So some darker parts here. You could do some scribbly bits if you wanted, like I'm doing here. And if you didn't want to do that, you could do more of a literal vein in your leaves. So a nice line down the center and then some diagonal lines that are pointing away as you move out to the tip of the leaf. And so you can do that as well. This one is, it's a little bit more of a relaxed look, I should say. But that's looking pretty nice. A little bit more dark on the base of those leaves. I think that looks really good. So we've got some shadow on the bottom, and then we have some lighter on the top. And I think I'm going to even add in some white gouache on the top of the leaves too, just for a highlight. So with watercolor, you would be adding in really light paint for, and let's make that really nice light yellow green here for the top before we do our white. That's really showing up nice. I like that. So with watercolor, we would do a really light green, then we would add a medium green, and then we would add a dark green for the shadows. And once we added that dark, we could not start to go lighter. So look at that. I'm liking how these are turning out. Those leaves are working. Sometimes I'm not so sure about the trajectory. Wow, that's a hard word for me tonight, apparently. So I'm adding in a little bit of green to this red color here to make more of a darker, deeper red. And I'm going to do, you know how tiger lilies have those little dots? So, and I know other lilies do too. I don't know all the names for all the lilies, but I do know that I grew up with tiger lilies. They were a beautiful, rich orange color, orange and black, growing naturally in our backyard, and they were wonderful. They were fabulous. I definitely looked forward to them every year. So adding in these little dots, they're kind of like freckles, and it's going to start our flower looking a bit more recognizable. You know, Easter is almost here, and lilies or peace lilies, pretty popular during this time of year, aren't they? So painting this kind of makes sense. This is not something I made for Easter, but just wanting to just become a little bit more proficient in gouache and hopefully helping you guys to be inspired to paint with gouache if you haven't before, or inspire you to continue in your gouache journey. So a little bit of splatter, just it's a thicker paint than the watercolor, so just hit that brush and it really fancies it up nicely. All right, so now that things have had some time to dry, we're going to add in the middle parts of our flower. The stamen, I believe the stamen is the long one right there. Now, I would be remiss to guess if all of them are part of that. Let me know in comments. I clearly don't know my flower parts as much as I would like to. Right now, I am using my lovely liner brush, and I'm just painting in these green parts to our lovely lily. So I have done them in a different color before, in brown or something like that, but I've noticed they tend to be green, so we're just going to go with green. And then the little tips have those little oval shaped pieces that that are usually brown. And so we'll add some brown paint here to the palette and just add in those parts as well. So this lily has been really fun to paint. I'm curious how you guys are doing right now. Are you feeling like this is going well? Is it frustrating? Is it exciting? Is it fun? Is it worrisome? Take a deep breath if there's any of those negative things I've mentioned or anything else that you can think of, because I want you to relax and have fun. Just like in all of my other painting videos, I encourage the fun. If we're not having fun, then what is the point of doing art? I mean, honestly. And darkening up that center a little bit more. And yeah, using my liner is great for details. If you may have noticed, we start with a larger brush and we get smaller as we go from large washes to more details. Of course, I'm going to stick with this nice round brush here. I'm just adding in red and darkening up the center, making it look just so fancy. I think it would be really fun to do this in white as well, or even try the orange and black one like I was mentioning, the tiger lily. So now since we have our center parts in there, it's going to be a little bit more tricky getting the red around there. So just paint around it if you do the steps out of order like I did. Ideally, the center should be done, but I just wanted to darken it up a bit. After I had the darker pink center, I thought that the red would go quite nicely. So we're just going to do a few little scratchy marks, as I like to say, on the tips of this flower. And I'm curious if there's another flower you'd like to have me paint in gouache. Let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to know what you think. And also, I'm curious what kind of painting medium is your favorite? Let me know in the comments as well. So I think I'd like to add in a little bit more splatter, just tapping the brush. I'm not seeing it show up too much, but there's a little bit of that yellow-green, just a little bit to accent the pink. And now we're going to take some white gouache. We're going to do a little bit more of those scratchy lines, scratchy marks on here. See, if I can learn to paint with gouache, you guys can as well. It's definitely a new medium for me, but I'm loving the versatility of being able to paint from light to dark and dark to light. And if I make a major mistake, I can just paint over it. It's great. A little bit of a highlight there on top of the leaves. Being able to use this with flowers is really fun, but I'm really loving painting landscapes with gouache. And I'm not sure how well it's going to do in the elements, especially as it gets warmer outside. But, you know, that's a whole nother consideration. I know that some people will make a little kind of like a wet palette where the materials they use underneath the gouache, where they put the gouache on top, if you're squirting it out of tubes, that material helps to keep it cool and keep it moist so it's not drying out. So there are things you can do. All right, so let's see. We're going to darken up the middle parts right here. I just have a really dark green. It's I don't know, it looks like an army green to me, a really brownish green color that I've mixed up just to darken up these parts again. And I hope that you are able to look at your painting at this point and that you can recognize some things that you really like about it. As I'm mixing up a nice cherry pink color here for the final details, I wanted to change these petals a little bit. I'm realizing they're just really straight, and I want them to be a little bit more loose, a little bit wonkier. So I'm just literally going over the edges and just kind of doing a shaky brush movement so that the petals don't look so perfectly round, if that makes sense. Wasn't liking the look of that. So here's a great thing, you know, you can always change a lot of the things, the details. If you don't like how something is, then add paint over it, especially with gouache. Cover it up and start again. You definitely can do that. There's a freedom there to be able to do that. I'm so excited that you've painted with me today. I hope you can find some things that you love about your painting, some colors or the composition or some different shapes. And I hope that this inspires you to pick up your paintbrush and paint with gouache. And if you want any of my other tips on watercolor painting, definitely check out my channel for those tips as well. And I also teach watercolor on Patreon. If you're not on there already, click on the link in the description to hear more about bonus content, and I'll see you guys on the next video.